Okay, good.
Well, feel ready to go. Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside, and our speakers this afternoon for the Chautauqua Environmental Series are Fred and Carol Miller. Fred and Carol have been engaged in farming since birth. Carol grew up on a dairy farm in Ashland County. The family farm is in Crawford County, just south of Bucyrus, along State Route 4. And they're actually celebrating 50 years of marriage in a few days, is it? On Friday. And today's talk will describe there are many conservation practices, such as cover crops and precision applications of fertilizers and herbicides. The fields are systematically drained, and the soil is protected with grass, waterways, and filter strips. But I would ask you would please mute your cell phone ringers if you haven't already, and help me in welcoming Fred and Carol Miller.
There you go.
This is an opportunity for Carol and I to do something that was just outside of our box, our comfort zone. But it's something that we believe in so strongly. We're glad to be here today to talk about our farm a little bit and how we came to be where we're at and some of our plans for the future. And just like to introduce with a few photos and talk about what we do on our farm, and then get to the conservation parts towards the end. And if anyone has any questions, just shout it out or put your hand up at any time. I think it's probably easier to answer questions than to try and just stand up here and talk by ourselves.
Right.
John gave me this really cool toy to play with. I hadn't seen this before, but the circle of light is just great. And that's our farm headquarters there in the white buildings, and this is a good way to highlight it. That's a photo I took last fall, and thought it was perfect to have the rainbow over top of the farm. Oh, I'm sorry. We're in the southern part of Crawford County, right on Route 4. So if you come back and forth to the lake on Route 4, once you get through Bucyrus, that's pretty much where we're at on both sides of Route 4 down through there.
How many acres?
We have about just about 2,000 acres we farm. Yeah. Our Carol and I retired at the end of 2024. And our youngest son Tyler is the operator of the farm. It's day-to-day decisions, profit and loss, buy and sell, inputs. That's his decisions now with some input from us. And we lease the land and the machinery to him, and we've been able to step away a little bit from the farm, but we're still right there. That's just another photo of the farm. The white storage buildings you see are the big one in the foreground is our shop, make repairs and store supplies in that building, and the rest are just to store equipment. The amount of equipment needed to farm 2,000 acres is it's just unbelievable how much iron we have to put under roof, and we can't fit it all in the buildings now.
put it in perspective, that you could put an airplane, and there was an airplane.
Yes, that is a hangar that was moved from Cleveland Hopkins in 1947. And it looks a little different than it did in 47. I've got another picture too. There, that's the farm in the late 40s. It was a large dairy and cattle farm. The grass runway, the X on the south side of the buildings, during World War II, Smith Engineering owned the farm, and some of the work in developing variable pitch propellers for airplanes, the prototype work or testing was done at this farm. And my dad and uncle purchased the farm in 1972, and Carol and I were able to purchase that farm from them, and it's grown over the years. Just a photo I really like. The rusty building is a granary, and it was in use in the 40s up through the 1970s. Storage of corn, and when it was built in the 30s, 40s, whatever, that was a modern structure. Oh, some of the other things we do, besides grow corn and soybeans, wheat, we'll harvest straw, take that to auctions in the winter. Son also runs a tiling business to install drainage tile for other farmers and for ourselves. The drainage tile is the black plastic underneath the yellow piece that Ed's working on there. This photo took us a long time to get to this point where we can do this reliably. This is corn planted in rows. That's the areas without the soil, and between the rows of corn is a cover crop. And that cover crop was planted in the fall before, protected the corn over the winter, or the ground over the winter. And then in the spring we planted without tillage into the cover crop, and able to produce corn without plowing, without disking, and conserve that soil, keep it from eroding. It's took us a long time to get to the point where we can do this reliably. When I first started out farming in the 1970s, a moldboard plow and a disc was all we knew. Everybody operated that way. And we were able to, over the years, learn to do it and conserve the soil. So now we do about 2,000 acres a year, and it's all no-till.
Sure.
What do you use as
What do you plant for a cover crop? What do you plant for a cover crop?
Oh, the cover crops are a variety of plants. We use some different grasses, broadleaves, clovers, turnips. This particular cover crop there is canola, also known as rapeseed. That's planted in the fall and over winters. It's one we've been very successful using.
Does it help with the weed control?
It does. The shading effect, the mulch that's on top of the soil, helps us to reduce the amount of herbicides that are needed for the crop. This is another instance of planting into a green cover crop. That's my son in the tractor pulling an air seeder, planting soybeans. A green cover crop is 3 feet tall, and will terminate that cover crop after it's planted, or after the soybeans are planted. And this one is really working out well to reduce herbicide needs.
What do you use to kill the cover crop?
Depending on the species, Roundup, a form of 2,4-D or dicamba, can be used to kill the cover crop, terminated.
It won't affect the soybeans at all.
I'm sorry?
It won't affect the soybeans you're seeded.
No, and so the genetics have allowed us, the improvements in genetics over the years, the use of Roundup-resistant seed, and also seeds that are resistant to other chemicals that we can use to control weeds, has changed farming. You know, before we had to plow, disc, cultivate. We couldn't keep the weeds under control without a lot of manual labor and tractors back and forth across the field. With the introduction of Roundup in the early 70s, that was a breakthrough for no-till crop production. Just for fun, we've planted a few sunflowers, and we get a lot of compliments on those things, and the birds really like them. Now to get into a little more of our story, this is the main farm shop, and that's water, that's flooded. We're flooded. That has happened 3 times in my memory. And this was just a few years ago. Huge rain, no place for the water to go. We get flooded, we got water in the building. We definitely don't care for that. So we had an opportunity several years ago, and the industry that is expanding in the Columbus area and south of Columbus, we're in the same watershed. We're at the very top of the watershed. Our water goes down through Columbus. Little Scioto River, the Olentangy all meet together in Columbus. Because of that expansion of industry in the Columbus area, those developers were required to go somewhere else and make it right. They were paving over streams, filling in wetlands. So another type of project manager came to see us and asked if we would be interested in this project. And that project was to improve the stream bed that the Little Scioto Farm is named after, and we farm on both sides of it. So after a lot of consideration, Carol and I had traveled and looked at these type of projects. We said, yeah, we want to do this. So the project is done now. It was completed in 2024. And it's really starting to take hold now. I just want to show you just a little bit about that, and then I'll work into the rest of our talk. This is from the bridge on our farm, looking to the south, and this is such a neat bit of technology. There, now you guys can see it too. That stream bed channel is basically the same as it was before this construction work started, but that narrow channel, the velocity of the water and the curves and angles of the stream bed caused erosion. when we got the high water like around the buildings, that picture. So this project stabilizes those beds, takes the oxbows, the sharp bends out of the river, and the really biggest part of it is this, that dike on each side of this stream bed, that's about 100, anywhere from 200 to 300 feet across. And that allows, when the stream overflows, to come up in this area, wider area, and you can visually see the water slow down as it comes out into that primary floodplain. And it has stopped the erosion of the stream bed and allowed the water to exit our farm in a more orderly manner and quicker. And it doesn't look like we're going to have that problem with the flooding around the farm buildings anymore. It was a 6-month-long project, multi-million dollars. We didn't have to pay for that. We just provided the land that was going to be built on. And it was land we were unable to farm because of the flooding, erosion. We're just so satisfied with the way that project has turned out. That is a little bit better view of how it looks now. That 15,000 feet of stream bed, mitigated, renewed. Somewhere between 10 and 15,000 trees have been planted. And it works. If we could get other farmers to cooperate and install the same kind of project, it would be a benefit for all of us. And my reason for bringing this up, the sign that says Western Reserve Land Conservancy. The reason we met those people, the attorney we worked with on the river project, she's a promoter of farmland conservation. Laura Curlis down in Yellow Springs, Southern Ohio, down by Dayton. She put us in touch with this Western Reserve. And now that's the rest of our story for today. I'll get into this. Carol,
What?
would you like to say a couple words while I get a drink of water?
Sure. The river project that they just showed, it was a fascinating project to watch overall. All of that area that was in the lighter, showed the river zigzagging, was all, instead of being flat ground, which would flood whenever we had significant rain, it holds all that water till it can actually drain away more readily. It doesn't show it, but they moved to scoop that all out to make that little, what do they call it, shelf down there. They moved 100,000 cubic feet of dirt for that whole project. And they came in and planted trees. And it's been quite the project to watch, because the first time it rained, you got your fingers crossed that it actually doesn't wash, that it actually holds the water and allows it to drain away like it should. But the preservation part of it here, you can see where the little Scioto is, and then the Sandusky's not very far away. And they suggested, because once you put it in a preservation, they can't be used for much of anything else except what you designate it to be used for. I guess down in Union County a few years ago, there was some preserved farmland down there, and a utility company came in and wanted to run lines across it. Well, it ended up in the court because they thought we can run lines across it even though it's preserved, but it ended up in the courts and it was denied because that was preserved farmland. So when you got to have the threat of utilities and who knows who else coming in wanting to take your ground, you do have some teeth in the game that it's preserved and it's designated that way, and you can usually tell them to go away, to put it nicely. We started with the red area. That's what we designated to put in. And while we were doing that, we had two smaller farms, the two in yellow on there, and they were smaller farms. So we donated those in to this preservation. We can designate what we want that ground to always be. It can't be divided up for lots. It can only be used for agricultural purposes. There's a lot of designations we could make on it. We agreed that greenhouses and livestock, things like that, as long as it was agricultural related, we were okay with it. So you can put stipulations on it, and it's not just in our lifetime, it will be there in perpetuity on these chunks of ground. So, you ready to talk now?
Sure. Question. Was this land mitigation or land improvement through the Soil Conservation Service?
They were one small part of it, really. That was one small part of it. Part of it, that river mitigation project was county controlled or county maintained ditch. We had to have the county commissioners sign off on that. We had to have soil and water conservation sign off on it. There was just a lot of understanding with a lot of people. We had to contact the property owners around us because their ground drains down through all this. So we had to have a sign off on a lot of people to get this approved. And in reality, there was no really downside to the whole situation. So it was.
Did it help pay for that?
No, it was all paid for through development funds, whatever they. So it was like a win-win. It helps them out. Ideally, we were told it was ideally so they could have cleaner water downstream. Because, you know, some of the big rivers are a municipal water source for many of those cities on downstream from us. So it's not like we're the only ones that benefit. Basically, everyone benefits from it.
The river project was totally funded privately, but it was funded by requirements from the EPA to mitigate and improve land at another location in the same watershed. So that was no governmental funds were involved in the river improvement project, but it had to be improved by every acronym you can name. And then the top of the list was the Army Corps of Engineers. One of the photos that was up in the slideshow I had earlier, where we were waiting, there was a dozen people in our office, and nobody was dressed in uniform. But that was representatives from the Army Corps of Engineers coming to inspect that project when it was finalized. We have preserved our farmland and are working to preserve farmland because of something very important to us, and that's our children, our legacy, those generations that come after us. Ohio has lost 1 million acres of prime farmland in the last 25 years. To get you in a perspective, if you look at Crawford County, how many square miles that is, I don't know. But there's about 200 and some thousand acres of cropland in production in that one county, Crawford County. That 1 million acres represent losing about 5 counties in Ohio of farmland that will never be farmed again. That's why we feel it's important that we dedicate that ground to forever farmland. There are financial and benefits as well for doing this. As part of our succession planning, our retiring after 50 plus years of producing corn, soybeans, wheat farming, we built up a fairly decent tax liability as we exit over a few years after retirement, just cleaning up our grain and stored and equipment and such. So this conservation easement that we've entered into as a donation allows us a tax deduction that helped to write off some of those, some of that income that has occurred over the years. I'll explain a little bit more how that come about. A conservation is an easement. It's a legal document restricting the use of the land in order to preserve its open space and character. There it is. And this conservation easements came about in 1980 when they became a permanent part of the Internal Revenue Code in 1980. And to be eligible, those easements have to be perpetual and serve a conservation purpose like farmland preservation. The state of Ohio is involved also as of 2008 through the state's Clean Ohio Fund. And this conservation easement has a combination of use restrictions that it can only be for agricultural purposes, for row crops, corn, soybeans, wheat. Livestock is considered agricultural, of course, as well as greenhouse production. So we're not trying to leave the opportunities open for those future generations, but the land can never be subdivided. We couldn't have a 5-acre housing lot separated off and grass mowed around that 5 acres forever and ever. It has to stay contiguous as one piece as it originally was surveyed and deeded, and can only be devoted to agriculture. It gives us some protection from eminent domain. As Carol talked earlier about down in Union County, sometimes that can be litigated, and if that happens, the sponsor that we have chosen will stand up for us in court, or descendants, or whoever owns that property that's under a conservation easement in the future.
Question. The conservation easement and the restriction that it always has to be agricultural related use, it has to have, and I would imagine somebody calculated the positive environmental impact of your waterway that was modified and expanded and protected, that there was a financial upside that really was the basis for coming up with the dollar that the companies had to put up for this kind of project. I know at Cedar Point we had to do that. But in perpetuity, you're going to have a positive contributor to the environment, I would presume, without question. Do you have an idea of the magnitude of that contribution to?
Tom, it's huge. As we have seen benefits in just a few months that the projects have been completed on the river, and it's going to be there now forever. So that's going to add up tremendously over the years. The improvements in water quality, the stopping the soil erosion, keeping whatever out of the river and streams, improving wildlife quality. It's permanent. It's not going to go away, and it's protected. It can never be changed. I don't want to confuse that issue that the river project was just fantastic, and I wanted to explain that how we got started in doing more conservation of acres and acres of land was because we were introduced to it through doing that river project. The river project was not our biggest goal. Our biggest goal is preserving those acres of farmland that surround the river that we own.
The H2O project in Ohio, have you benefited from that as well?
Tile drainage?
The H2O project that DeWine has going into protecting Lake Erie, so if your water flow goes south, are you involved in any of that kind of assistance?
We are on the divide. Some of our farms, the water flows north on the Sandusky River to the Sandusky River Bay. So because of that, we are involved in the H2 Ohio program, which Governor DeWine signed into law a number of years ago, and it has made a change. Lake Erie is getting cleaner because we're controlling the phosphorus, we're controlling runoff, we're using more conservation tillage, more cover crops, but that's the river going north. The river going south is, because we're in Crawford County, they take all of our land, even though part of it goes south, in the H2 Ohio program. A bit about this. There was challenges in putting together these projects of conserving the conservation easement. In fact, the large one that was in red that we're working on now, we started that 3 years ago. And we hope to close on it by the end of this year, but there's no guarantees that it's actually going to happen. There's so many things to be done. We have to look at, we have to contact and talk with the county commissioners, our trustees, township trustees, get approval letter from each of them that we go forward with an agricultural easement to preserve farmland. We talk to the Soil and Water District, county engineers, county auditor, county recorder,
NCRS.
NRCS has the final say on approving, as well as the Ohio Department of Agriculture. So it's some federal, some state, local, everybody gets involved. Part of this was we needed to have the land surveyed. The previous surveys were 50, 80, 100 years old and were out of date. And part of doing those new surveys, we found out our boundaries weren't exactly as accurate as what we thought. We had an instance with one neighbor who had intruded over on some of our ground, and we didn't know. We didn't farm it, so that part of it. And wasn't a big deal, but NRCS that's encroachment that has to be corrected. So talk to the neighbor. Really not a problem. Another farmer told him what we're doing, and his wife, and we got together and corrected the problem, and it was not a hassle. Both sides came away friendly. Another one, a fence was over on our property, 6 feet. It's now been corrected with really no hassle. So it's nice to have cooperation from our neighbors, and by doing an accurate survey, we learned a few things. The timeline about faster donated easement. Yes, a donated easement takes less paperwork, less approvals by agencies, and it can be done in a matter of
Few months.
8 to 12 months to donate an easement. This one we're working on now is part paid and part donated. That's the one that's taken 3 years. It's a little more hoops to jump through. Working with a professional, people who have dealt in putting all this information together, the application process, the surveys, the contacts with all those acronyms we've talked about is important. They're called a sponsor, and the sponsor ends up holding the easement on the land. Carol and I will always own the land as long as we're alive, and our heirs will own it after that. But the easement is on top of that, and that's where we get the perpetual, always going to be farmland, never subdivided, those things that we desire come into play. So the sponsor is needed to follow and make sure that those rules, those agreements are held up throughout the generations, throughout the years. A local township soil and water or trustees can be a sponsor, but they're not really terribly interested in doing that type of thing because they've got enough other responsibilities, and it's not something they're expert in. So I guess what we're recommending is if anyone's interested in pursuing something like this, the professionals are worth it. And they're not free. We made a donation to support their cause, their nonprofit, and because of their expertise, it's very easily justified. I think I've covered all that part. Carol, can you give me a break and talk about Hannah and Laura, the people we probably work with the most?
It's a virtual alphabet soup of people we've worked with. There's been the contractor and the guys that actually do the land work, and surveyors show up when you least expect them. We've had to have, we had a local appraisal done, and they found a few discrepancies in the land description. And then we had to have, when it was an IRS appraisal of the ground. So we had somebody come out one day, and I took her around the farm in the side-by-side, and I thought she'd take a lot of notes, and she wrote what time it was and where she was at on the top of the page, and I drove her around, and I'd stop and point out the corners of the property and anything unusual or unique about it. And she held her phone out the window, and she must have snapped 100 pictures. And I said, that was the legwork for the appraisal. And I thought, gee, that didn't take long at all. Well, then it's taken another month before they ever got it written up. So everything, it sounds like one small step, but it just takes time every step of the way. In the day of email and moving stuff around that way, I said it's the same thing. You think it's going to happen in an hour, it'll take 2 weeks. So we've had different people show up when you least expect them. And a lot of times he's out in the field or helping someplace else, and I have to take care of it. But it's interesting. We had a neighbor who writes an article in the paper, and she wanted to know all about it when we started planting trees and what was going on out there. And call her up, have her come over. She wanted to meet the project manager and talk to the project manager, and then she has more questions, and so it goes on. And I just feel like we've been shoveling paperwork on this whole process of the land trust for 3 years. It's been like that. So we've had a good lawyer in the mix. We've had cooperation with all the governmental agencies in our community, which is interesting in itself. So we even had one meeting on the side of the road one day to declare that they could actually do this, which I thought couldn't believe they scheduled it, and it was on the side of the road, Route 4 going up through there. And I suggested they meet over on another side road so they were out away from the traffic. And when we got to the meeting, somebody says, "Why are we meeting here?" And I said, "I didn't call it here." And they said, "Well, the county engineer did." And we're all looking around, and he's nowhere in sight. So I said, "You should take that as a clue, maybe not suggest a meeting where he suggests." So I'm sure a lot of you have a lot more questions or interested in this whole process. We're still in contact with this Hannah Kelling, who's our representative with Western Reserve, and we talk to her quite frequently. She's usually got some interesting, lets us know every step of the way, because we have to sign papers, send them back in, and they'll send us more papers, and we sign them and send them back in. So she makes sure all those get delivered to the proper entities here and there and everywhere. So it's just been a very long, interesting process. When they draw it all out, we never dreamed it would last this long, but it's making progress and it's getting there.
I could add something to this. In 2024, the first land that we preserved, our first part of that project, was also the first farmland preserved in Crawford County. We have talked one-on-one and had a few meetings and have had so many people interested in adding to this. There's 3 landowners, farmers in Crawford County have added acres since our first donation, and there are more people every day asking us questions, looking at this as a solution for preserving farmland. And I just found out our local Soil and Water is having a farmland conservation open house planning session the 30th of July. Carol just showed me the article on that in today's paper. So that's progress. The quote on the screen, when it comes to stewardship, we receive from our fathers to hold in trust for our sons. That is so important to us. I don't know who to credit that quote with. I've never been able to find the original author. It's not exactly, but in the Bible there are several references to the same type of thing, that we are here to hold land temporarily during our lifetime, and we want to pass it on to the next generations following in as good a shape as we found it, if not better.
You gotta go through pictures?
Hmm?
You're gonna show all the pictures and, yeah.
Yep, need to learn any more? Carol's got some business cards down here. I forgot to bring mine. We can put you in contact with someone who can answer the questions as probably better than we can, but this was a wait for us to introduce it to a few dozen people here at Lakeside, and we thank you all for coming and listening to us. We have more questions. We'd love to answer those.
Yeah, question.
Did you think of putting your land in the conservatory before your river project, or that was the stimulus for that?
That was the stimulus of it. The river project was the stimulus. The river project was the stimulus that got us interested in doing this. So, yeah, got the cart before the horse, or maybe reverse. You got another question?
How much money out of your pocket did all this cost you? Or was it a lot, or just?
The river mitigation was really nothing out of our pocket because it was all funded through private funds from developers and to offset the development work. With the land preservation, we've had to pay for surveys, you know, regular paperwork, shuffling, selling property kind of stuff. So, any other questions? I got one up here.
Yeah, so we drive up and down Route 4 all the time.
Yeah.
So all those white posts started showing up. Are those the trees that were planted? Is that right?
Those are all trees that they have planted. They showed up about a year and a half ago. It was right at October. They showed up with 2 semis full of trees and piled them out there. And then they had a crew come like within 2 weeks, and they went out, what was it, a dozen guys in that crew, and they planted all those trees, like lickety-split. And then they put those tubes around them. Those tubes have been what have kept the deer off of them. We have really bad deer population right in that area through there. This spring they started, come in to check how good the trees were holding up and everything like that. And they found that mice had nested at the bottom of them where the grass would get caught in there. So we had people coming and trapping mice, if you can believe that, for several weeks. They didn't want to poison them. The first person to come out apparently was an intern and did not know how to set a mouse trap effectively. But they were coming back every 3 or 4 days and cleaning up the mice. And I went out one day, the guy was out there, and I said, I don't mean to sound like an idiot, but are you taking the carcasses with you? Are you checking them for something? Because everything, they check everything, And he says, no, we've just been throwing them out for the coyotes. I said, okay. And then he looks at me and goes, why do you ask? And I said, I didn't know. I said, everybody's always checking everything, you didn't know. But they'd only found just a few voles, but the most part of it had been field mice. And they could tell you what exactly kind of mice it was, too. So, but the deer have been pretty hard on some of those trees down through there, and they were going to take the tubes off. But when they saw how much damage was done by the deer, they're going to leave them on another couple years probably. So they came back and they checked. They thought 80%, if 80% of them survived, they'd do good. And it was better than that, but the deer have chewed the tops off what they stick out of those it's like corrugated plastic tubes they have them in. So, and there was a nice mix of trees they put in. They were all hardwoods. They gave us the list and said, tell us what you want, what you don't want. There was a few varieties in there that I suggested they scratch off the list, and the guy inquisited me why I wanted them scratched off the list. And I said, well, they're junk trees. One of them was a silver maple, and then there was some redbud. I didn't want to plant those. And the guy looked at me kind of funny. He goes, well, why? He said, those are a really nice tree. And I says, yeah, they're a really nice tree, but they don't grow in these heavy soils in this area. So when they did this river project, they counted the fish the summer before they actually did it. And they come in and they shock the fish and then stand and count what you got laying there that's all belly up. And now they'll recover in a few days. But they were tickled that the fish population returned as well as what it did, because they came back after they did it and checked it again. They also found freshwater clams when they did the river project, which I didn't know there was such a thing. But they gathered them all up and put them in onion sacks, and they kept them in the river overnight. Well, then the next week they came and went on upstream above the project, what little there was, and distributed all those freshwater clams. So when the project is done, eventually they'll come downstream and repopulate the area that was all disturbed down through there. So that was a really fascinating project to watch. We was out there every several days, keeping an eye on them, and they moved right along. Anybody else got a question? Sure, Joyce.
How much of your crops do you lose to deer and other animals?
How much crop damage do you have from deer?
How much property, what?
Crop damage from deer.
Oh my, sometimes it can be extensive. The one farm that we did an easement on in 2024 on the Noss Road, close to the Sandusky River, and that's in the part that goes north. Woods on two sides of that farm, heavy woods, and the deer just ravaged the crops. The first 200, 250 feet along the edge of the woods and just grew nothing. Soybeans gone, corn gone. So we tricked the deer. We planted alfalfa, grasses, forbs in a border along the woods between the field, the crop production field, and the woods. There's this grassy area that's just, the deer love it. They're out there chewing all the time. And we enrolled that in this conservation reserve program. So fortunately, they get paid a few dollars an acre to keep that ground in grass. And the deer kind of stay away from the corn and soybeans a little better than they did before. We've offered them a little something to stay out of the cornfield. And that field, that was about 8.5 acres that went into that border on two sides of that farm. That we don't farm it anymore, but the deer was damaged that much each year. Tom?
Off this topic maybe a bit, but you were talking about no-till farm.
Yes.
And when you're putting in this,
when you put this project in, you're protecting the rain flow in there that's going to come in there because of the ground cover, you said you measure the pesticides and things like that and fertilizers. How economical is it compared to the old-fashioned way of the three things you said, till, boom, boom?
The question is to compare the cost of having no-till production to the previous full heavy tillage disc plow, cultivate. Yes, there are additional expenses, particularly in machinery involved to be able to handle that residue. We found, well, the first cover crops I planted and tried to no-till in was in 1992. And I had a tremendous cover crop, but I did not have the equipment to plant into it. So there was a failure there because I did have to go and plow and tear it up and disc it to plant it. But I did have a beautiful cover crop. And in the decades since 1992, we've improved our equipment and we're able to do it now successfully. So there's additional costs involved there, yes.
But you're still ahead by doing it.
Absolutely. Well, fuel is a major expense. And with everyone knows what the prices of gasoline have done. Well, diesel fuel is even worse. We were able to plant all of our crops this spring on 2,000 acres, all no-till, with 1,000 gallons of diesel fuel. Because we went ahead and make one trip across the field with the planter or the air seeder. It's a tremendous savings in fuel. It would be 3-4 times that much with tillage.
I assume there are other areas of Western Reserve in the state. Is there there's a group over here in more northwest Ohio as well? Land preservation groups?
There are other nonprofits that do the paperwork for the farmland preservation. Western Reserve is the largest one in Ohio. They do some work up into Pennsylvania, some up into Michigan, but they're based in Cleveland. I'm not terribly familiar with the names of the other ones, that they're smaller, but yes, there are opportunities to look at other places.
I can help out with that answer, as I am a director for the Logan County Land Trust, which is in west central Ohio, 2.5 hours south of here, but I'm also a farmer. How many other farmers are in the room? Okay, well, what Carol and Fred have been saying is spot on about the deer, about the how much, and the raccoons, what they eat is terrible, and also about changing to no-till and cover crops, and the efficiencies of fuel and equipment and time are a major thing. So I want to applaud them on all those things they've said. And about the easements, I'm involved in my 6th easement right now. I totally agree with everything they're saying about them. Conservation Ohio is promoting that and putting out funds to do that. And it's a long process. I've been involved in 3 and even 4 years of trying to get these things through. They take time to score them, to every agency that you can think of has to sign off on it. So it's time consuming. But I really liked what he said in one of the bullet points he mentioned up there at the beginning there about how it's not about me and my legacy, it's about the land. And that land will be preserved whether my children or grandchildren farm it or not. And that's what I'm really interested in. I have 2 sons and 2 grandchildren in my operation, and it's over 3,000 acres. But that's all right. I'm trying to preserve the land, and not just for my family, but for anyone who wants to farm it. It'll be there. We have a sign over the top of our kitchen that overlooks a beautiful valley to the east. It says, God saw all that he'd made, and behold, it was very good. And we want to keep it that way. So I just want to encourage all of you in here that are non-farmers to be in support of that Conservation Ohio program and the easements and what's going on, and the no-till and cover crops, which I've been doing for a long time, and I fully support that part of it. It takes herbicides and chemicals to control the weeds. We know that, but we're reducing those by this program. And the alternative would be to till the land continuously and stir it up and make it vulnerable to erosion from these heavy rains we've had. So it's a better thing, but yet there's trade-offs, and you have to go through those. And I'm sure Carol and Fred would agree that there are trade-offs, but they're worth it, and the way they're doing it is the right way. And I applaud them for the program they've put on and promoted. So just well done. So.
Thank you so much for confirming what we're trying to express, and you do a better job of it than we could. Thank you. I want to come and shake your hand afterwards.
What am I supposed to say?
Thank you very much, Fred and Carol. Thank you.
For having us.